Welcome to my first YouTube tutorial on how to make a cosplay prop, and in this tutorial we're going to be making Toji's blade. Toji's blade is the inverted spear of heaven, and it is a special grade curse tool known for its ability to nullify curse techniques. Now this is made pretty much entirely of cardboard, so the first step is going to be the sketch. Starting off first, to make a cosplay prop, you're going to want some sort of sketch. You can skip forward to about 1 minute and 17 seconds instead of watching how I sketch this out. But if you haven't made cosplay props before, normally making some sort of blueprint or something along the lines of a sketch for your prop is so incredibly important. You can see here that I'm sketching out the kind of design, figuring out where everything is going to be along with also the measurements. And I do have a screenshot at just about 1 minute and 17 seconds to show you all of the different dimensions of this. And surprisingly, this is actually a pretty small prop in comparison to some of the other things that I have made over the years. Now, after I got that sketch down, I did end up making a copy of this as well, just so I had an additional sheet. And the measurements are going to come up on the screen in just a moment. And you can also come back to here at the 1 minute and 17 second mark. You'll be able to find that in the description of the video to go back to this portion of the video to get all of those measurements. This is the cardboard that I'm using. Now, when you're using this cardboard, you need to cut it in a certain direction. See how those lines are going upwards? You want them upwards rather than across, just to make it stronger. Easiest way to go and transfer any sort of image without having to either cut different pieces out of paper is using a oil pastel or a chalk pastel on the back end of the sketch that you've made. So I did that, placed it down on my cardboard, and now I'm going over all of the lines with the sculpting tool. It's nice and flat, it's a piece of metal, and I'm following the lines using my ruler just to make sure I get these as accurate as I possibly can. And I highly suggest doing this. It's just so much easier to go and do rather than printing a whole bunch of different blueprints or whatever you're going to be using for the sketch. It's typically what I usually do myself as well. Now I'm making these little tiny cut lines. These cut lines are pretty small. I believe they were about 0.3 of an inch, and then I'm connecting all of these lines. I didn't want to make them too big, but I made them pretty much all the same exact size. These lines that I'm drawing, these are going to be folded in a little bit later on once we go and finish everything up. Now, what I did was I taped this down, and I had gotten that inner portion of where those lines were, and this is going to go into the center to reinforce this blade. You can see here that I have two different sides for this. So I have the front side and I have the back side. It is a mirror image of the opposite side, which I had printed an additional paper for this. I was able to flip it and then trace again. Now I'm just cutting this out. I am going very slow when I do this, just because trying to retrace this, along with also I'm cutting this out in little sections rather than trying to cut out large pieces, because if I slip, then I'm gonna have to do this entire piece again. And yeah, this will take a decent amount of time. From what I remember, it took about 45 minutes to cut everything out. So go slow, be careful. And after it's cut out, where we have those little fold lines, I'm using the back end of a razor blade little box cutter thing to press those in and press it down. As I'm pressing the cardboard, I'm lining it up with the line that I had drawn on for where those fold lines are. And this is really important for you to do because this is going to give the blade a lot more depth and make it so much easier when you go and cut along any of those little lines that you made. So after that has been done, which you can kind of see how I'm cutting into it, trying to create a straight line, then I went in and I cut across where I had drawn on those lines. And after I cut those lines, then you're good to fold everything and start to really see how this is all going to come together with the shape. So of course, here's more of just me cutting. You can fast forward a couple of seconds, about 10 seconds. After all of those lines have been cut, then we can fold these pieces in And you can kind of see that there's a bit of material that's going to be overlapping. That is not an issue just because of the way that I assembled this and how I made this blade. Now, after we have both sides folded, then we're going to put a generous amount of glue into the center, take that reinforced piece that we had cut out, stick it there, press it down, put a generous amount of glue onto the other side, and then we're going to line up the other piece and sandwich it together. Make sure to press everything down. And at the edges, after that has dried, what I'm using is a paper bag, folding the different pieces of this paper bag and creating these strips that I'm going along the edges of the blade with. I've seen others make the same exact blade that I have made, and what they've done is they've gone along the edges of the cardboard and just glued everything together. This gives it a nice, smooth edge, and I think it brings just a lot more character to the sword. It makes it look a lot more realistic as a prop, and it's going to keep everything together and make it way more sturdy. So say if you're swinging it around at a convention, it accidentally hooks on something, you're not going to have a little piece that rips or pulls or tears. You should be going around the entire sword with this, minus the bottom. Now I'm drawing out the guard, along with also figuring out exactly what the appropriate length is going to be. I determined that about 4 inches long is going to work from point to point of at least the rectangle shape. You can fast forward this video as well too, to 6 minutes and 57 seconds rather than watching me sketch out this entire thing and figure out what the shape's going to look like along with also the sizes. But I marked the center point, lined up my blade that I had made sure was fully dry, stuck that in the center, and traced around. That's going to be really important for how this is going to fit. Then I finished up just that little notch that is at the top, made sure to sketch that out. And here's the pause still image. You can also go into the description to go back to exactly where this timestamp is to go back and get all of the measurements. Now, exactly like what I did for the actual blade portion of this, I'm using again another oil pastel and retracing this. You're going to need 5 different pieces of this. You could always maybe have 6 or 7, just depending on if you wanted to make it a bit thicker, but I ended up using 5. The center piece, which you will see here, I only traced around the outer portion of it. So this one is a solid piece that is not going to have any cuts into it. Then I ended up having 2 of these ones that have the oval shape, and then 2 that are going to have the circle. I ended up having the oval shape on all of them, and then I sketched out a little circle and kind of figured out how that was going to be size-wise after the fact. But here's me cutting out some of these pieces, which again, this is another piece. You need to go nice and slow with this. If you accidentally mess up, it's fine. You still have the sketch. You can always draw out more, but the slower you go, the better it's going to be. Then I'm taking out the oval, figuring out, making sure that lines up. Yes, I know it is not the correct direction. It's fine. I ended up flipping it later. It was just to test it out. And then I'm cutting out the remainder of these pieces. So that center piece there, which is going to be the solid piece. Then I went back to my sketch after I had everything cut out. I decided on exactly how big the circle was going to be. I was able to line it up with the back end of where I already had the missing bit of oil pastel, drew that circle on, and then I was good to go and cut that out. I also had the other piece here, which was another one that I was going to add the circle into. So after I cut out that circle, then I lined that up with that other piece. Then I glued everything together, so those oval pieces were going onto the top. That flat piece is in the center here. Again, a very generous amount of glue on here just so everything sticks together. And then the 2 circular cut pieces at the bottom. After all of that had dried together, then I was good to put more of a paper bag onto the outer portion. With a generous amount of glue on the edges, I was able to glue down more of a brown paper bag. Now, the brown paper bag piece that I cut was slightly larger than this, but because the cardboard is nice and flat, it's easy to go and remove any additional bit of paper that might be over the edges. You can kind of see what I'm doing here, just going along, letting it kind of glide across, and then there is the piece, so it can go off to the side and now dry. This piece of cardboard that I'm using is 19 inches across, and from what I remember is about 20 inches long, but I ended up cutting off a couple of inches after it was fully rolled together. What I'm doing is I'm scoring these pieces of cardboard. I'm going upwards, and it's going to make it so it can easily roll and easily move. If you don't do this, it's going to look really blocky and you will not be able to roll it. So after all of that is cut, roll it this direction. On the side that is not cut, squish it together a couple of times. It's going to be a lot easier for you to roll it the opposite direction. Then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to roll it one time before we go and glue that all together. So after you've rolled that one time and then unrolled it, make sure, of course, it fits, which fits perfectly. Then you are good to go and glue. So I'm using a generous amount of glue to get that together. Then, like I did before, I am rolling that together, just like so. You want to make sure you're using a good amount of pressure while you do this. And when you get closer to the end, you're probably going to want to use a bit more glue, which is exactly what I did, just because you want a nice strong hold. You don't want that rolling out. You don't want it falling apart at all. Then when I got to the end, put some glue on that little area there, pressed it down, held it for about 15 to 20 seconds. And to blend that edge further, I used more of a paper bag, spread out the glue, and put a strip down. I did this pretty much on every edge that I had of the sword, just to blend those edges and make things look a lot more even. If you do this when you're painting it, it's going to look so much better. It's going to look so much cleaner. Cut off any additional material that is overlapping from the edge. Now, this piece that I made, which is for the end portion, you can see the sketch that I had here. From what I remember is about 2 inches long and about 1 inch in total for the circular area. I traced the bottom of the sword handle, stuck a piece of paper onto the back, made sure I cut a little hole in there, and from what I remember, the hole was about 0.5 inches. Now, it might be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, depending on exactly what you're working with or how big you want to make this piece, but it's pretty much the same exact thing as what I did for the rest of the sword. Wrapped some of that paper around it, used a generous amount of glue, glued all the pieces together, and held it in place for a while. The opposite end, I ended up using a chopstick, which this holds everything together, found where the center point was on this piece, used my X-Acto knife, spun it around, got a hole in the center, and then stuck the chopstick through. Now, the way that I designed the blade, I had to slide it into one side, kind of in the middle of it. Be careful when you do this, you don't want your sword to go and rip. Then I lined that up, made sure it looked good, made sure, of course, too, it was correct on the side, along with also that circular end bottom was also turned to the side. Then it was time to go and assemble everything and glue it all together. Generous amount of glue, sliding that through, pressing it. On the other side, generous amount of glue. Taking the sword piece, which you probably want to put some glue onto the chopstick as well, sliding that into place and making sure it is on the correct side as well too, because that would be so tragic if I crafted it and it was not correct. So then after that, I took some additional pieces from some of the cut material that I had that was already scored, and I wrapped it around here. From what I remember, that was about 0.7 inches This little piece here, from what I remember, was about 0.2-ish inches. Same exact thing, wrapped it around, made sure it was glued down, cut off any additional material. And then this bottom area here, from what I remember, this was about 0.3 inches. Same exact thing, wrapped it around, made sure it was glued down, and cut off any additional material. Now, the inverted spear of heaven has an edge to it that is broken. So, to go and create that broken effect, I used 1-ply toilet paper, ripped it up, put it into a glass container, and then I ended up adding some water in with it, which it's really not a lot. You just need enough to be able to continue to break it down further. And if it's really wet, you might need to squeeze it out. Pretty much what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a paper paste. So after it's been squeezed out, we're using Gorilla Glue, cardboard, and also toilet paper. It is all a tree material, so using Gorilla Glue, this is a really, really, really strong bond. Make sure you're using gloves though, and wearing them, because this stuff is not awesome for your skin. And here is pretty much the consistency of what you want this paste to be. If you want it even finer, you can use a blender. Make sure you use a blender that you don't use food in. Now, we're scoring the cardboard. This is really important to do. You need a surface that it's going to stick to, and scoring it really does help. I'm also using a metal sculpting tool to get that spread out a bit more, and just to go and thin it down, along with also even it out and smooth it slightly. After I have that on both sides, I also did use Gorilla Glue to be able to smooth it down more and just spread it a bit thinner. I'm using this little palette knife and creating some of these indents. When this stuff dries, it dries really, really hard. But because we're using paper, it's going to be one of those things, if you accidentally bump it, it's not going to go anywhere, and it does take a while for it to dry. Now we're spray painting. So I'm spray painting the top of this sword, of course, silver. From what I remember, I think it's called mirror-like finish spray. It's the stuff that you use to create mirror-like surfaces with, so it's really shiny, and when it hits sunlight, it looks cool. It looks almost real. So after I have a couple layers of spray paint down, which this is cardboard, it does absorb paint pretty well, so you're probably going to need about 3 layers on the safe side. Then you're good to paint the remainder of the details, which some gold paint right there. Gold paint on that circular end for it. And here, which is one of my favorite things to go and do, I'm adding shadow very slowly with some black. I'm also going along the edge of where I have that paper down that I created when I was gluing everything together and shaping the sword. Adding some cracks with a fine tip brush. And finishing up any detail that I really wanted to go and add to this blade. Which, of course, I'm adding these little circles here. Well, little half circles. Just to make it look more like what the blade looks like. And then I'm gluing down some yarn, so a very generous amount of glue, wrapping the yarn, letting it dry, and after everything has dried, the blade is then complete. And then the blade is complete. If you have any questions or comments, make sure to leave it in the comments section. I'll do my best to answer any questions that come up. This was my first tutorial on how to make a cosplay prop, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.